Azuma as Adzuma was an armored cruiser built for the Imperial Japanese Navy in the late 1890s. As Japan lacked the industrial capacity to build such warships herself, the ship was built in France. She participated in most of the naval battles of the Russo-Japanese War of 1904–05 and was lightly damaged during the Battle of Ulsan and the Battle of Tsushima.Azuma. Began the first of 5 training cruisers in 1912 and saw no combat during World War I. She was never formally reclassified as a training ship, although she exclusively served in that role from 1921 until she was disarmed and hulked in 1941. Adzuma was badly damaged in an American carrier raid in 1945, and subsequently scrapped in 1946. Background and design. The 1896 naval expansion plan was made after the First Sino-Japanese War, and included 4 armored cruisers in addition to 4 more battleships, all of which had to be ordered from overseas shipyards as Japan lacked the capability to build them itself. Further consideration of the Russian building program caused the IJN to believe that the battleships ordered under the original plan would not be sufficient to counter the Imperial Russian Navy. Budgetary limitations prevented ordering more battleships, and the IJN decided to expand the number of more affordable armored cruisers to be ordered from 4 to 6 ships, believing that the recent introduction of tougher crop cemented armor would allow them to stand in the line of battle. The revised plan is commonly known as the 6-6 Fleet. The first 4 ships were built by Armstrong Whitworth in the United Kingdom, but the last 2 ships were built in Germany and France. To ensure ammunition compatibility, the IJN required the builders to use the same British guns as the other 4 ships. In general, the IJN provided only a sketch design and specifications that each builder had to comply with, otherwise each builder was free to build the ships as they saw fit. Unlike most of the contemporaries, which were designed for commerce raiding to defend colonies and trade routes, Adzuma and her half-sisters were intended as fleet scouts and to be employed in the battle line. Description: the ship was 137.9 meters long overall and 131.56 meters between perpendiculars. She had a beam of 17.74 meters and had an average draft of 7.18 meters. Adzuma displaced 9,278 metric tons at normal load and 9,953 metric tons at deep load. The ship had a metacentric height of 0.85 meters. She had a double bottom and her hull was subdivided into 213 watertight compartments. Her crew consisted of 670 officers and enlisted men. Adzuma had 2 4-cylinder triple-expansion steam engines, each driving a single propeller shaft. Steam for the engines was provided by 24 Belleville boilers, and the engines were rated at a total of 18,000 indicated horsepower. The ship had a design speed of 21 knots. She carried up to 1,200 metric tons of coal and could steam for 7,000 nautical miles at a speed of 10 knots. Armament. The main armament for all of the 6-6 Fleet armored cruisers was 4 Armstrong Whitworth built 45 caliber 8-inch guns in twin-gun turrets, fore and aft of the superstructure. The electrically operated turrets were capable of 130 degrees rotation left and right, and the guns could be elevated to plus 30 degrees and depressed to minus 5 degrees. The turret accommodated 65 shells, but could only be reloaded through doors in the turret floor and the ship's deck that allowed the electric winch in the turret to hoist shells up for the shell room deep in the hull. The guns were manually loaded and had a rate of fire about 1.2 rounds per minute. The 203mm gun fired 113.5-kilogram armor-piercing projectiles at a muzzle velocity of 760 meters per second to a range of 18,000 meters. The secondary armament consisted of a dozen Ellsworth Ordnance Company Pattern Z quick-firing 40-caliber 6-inch guns. All but 4 of these guns were mounted in armored casemates on the main and upper decks, and the mounts on the upper deck were protected by gun shields. The 45.4-kilogram up shells were fired at a muzzle velocity of 700 meters per second. Adzuma was also equipped with a dozen 40-caliber QF 12-pounder 12 CWT guns and 8 QF 2.5-POUNDER Yamauchi guns as close-range defense against torpedo boats. The former gun fired 76mm 5.7-kilogram projectiles at a muzzle velocity of 719 meters per second. Adzuma was equipped with 5 457mm torpedo tubes, 1 above water in the bow and 4 submerged tubes, 2 on each broadside. The Type 30 torpedo had a 100-kilogram warhead and 3 range speed settings: 800 meters at 27 knots, 1000 meters at 23.6 knots or 3000 meters at 14.2 knots. Armor. All of the 6.6 Fleet armored cruisers used the same armor scheme with some minor differences, one of which was that the 4 later ships all used crop-cemented armor. The waterline belt ran the full length of the ship and its thickness varied from 178mm amidships to 89mm at the bow and stern. It had a height of 2.13 meters, of which 1.50 meters was normally underwater. The upper strake of belt armor was 127mm thick and extended from the upper edge of the waterline belt to the main deck. It extended 61.49 meters from the forward to the rear barbette. Adzuma had only a single transverse 76mm armored bulkhead that closed off the forward end of the central armored citadel. The barbettes, gun turrets and the front of the casemates were all 152mm thick, while the sides and rear of the casemates were protected by 51mm of armor. The deck was 63mm thick and the armor protecting the conning tower was 356mm in thickness. Construction in Korea. The contract for Adzuma, named after the Kanto region, was signed on the 12th of October 1897 with Ateliers et Chantiers de l'Île, and the ship was laid down at the shipyard in Saint-Nazaire on the 1st of February 1898. She was launched on the 24th of June 1898 and completed on the 29th of July 1900. Adzuma left for Japan the next day and arrived in Yokosuka on the 29th of October. Captain Fuji Koichi assumed command before the start of the Russo-Japanese War in February 1904, until he was relieved in January 1905 by Captain Murakami Kakuichi. Russo-Japanese War. At the start of the Russo-Japanese War, Adzuma was assigned to the 2nd Division of the 2nd Fleet. She participated in the Battle of Port Arthur on the 9th of February 1904, when Vice Admiral Togo Hashiro led the combined fleet in an attack on the Russian ships of the Pacific Squadron anchored just outside Port Arthur. Togo had expected a surprise night attack by his destroyers to be much more successful trouble than it was, anticipating that the Russians would be badly disorganized and weakened, but they had recovered from the surprise and were ready for his attack. The Japanese ships were spotted by the protected cruiser Boyarin, which was patrolling offshore, and alerted the Russians. Togo chose to attack the Russian coastal defenses with his main armament and engage the ships with his secondary guns. Splitting his fire proved to be a poor decision, as the Japanese 8- and 6-inch guns inflicted little damage on the Russian ships, which concentrated all the fire on the Japanese ships with some effect. Although many ships on both sides were hit, Russian casualties numbered some 150, while the Japanese suffered roughly 90 killed and wounded before Togo disengaged. In early March, Vice Admiral Kamimura Hikonojo was tasked to take the reinforced 2nd Division north and make a diversion off Vladivostok. While scouting for Russian ships in the area, the Japanese cruisers bombarded the harbor and defenses of Vladivostok on 6 March to little effect. Upon the return to Japan a few days later, the 2nd Division was ordered to escort the transports ferrying the Imperial Guards Division to Korea and then to join the ships blockading Port Arthur. Kamimura was ordered north in mid-April to cover the Sea of Japan and defend the Korea Strait against any attempt by the Vladivostok Independent Cruiser Squadron, under the command of Rear Admiral Carl Jessen, to break through and unite with the Pacific Squadron. The two units narrowly missed each other on the 24th in heavy fog, and the Japanese proceeded to Vladivostok, where they laid several minefields before arriving back to Ulsan on the 30th. The division failed to intercept the Russian squadron as it attacked several transports south of Okinoshima Island on the 15th of June. Due to heavy rain and fog, the Russians sortied again on the 30th of June, and Kamimura finally was able to intercept them the next day near Okinoshima. The light was failing when they were spotted, and the Russians were able to disengage in the darkness. Jessen's ships sortied again on the 17th of July, headed for the eastern coast of Japan to act as a diversion and pull Japanese forces out of the Sea of Japan and the Yellow Sea. The Russian ships passed through Tsugaru Strait 2 days later and began capturing ships bound for Japan. The arrival of the Russians off Tokyo Bay on the 24th caused the Naval General Staff to order Kamimura to sail for Cape Toimasaki, Kyushu, fearing that Jessen would circumnavigate Japan to reach Port Arthur. 2 days later he was ordered north to the Kii Channel and then to Tokyo Bay on the 28th. The General Staff finally ordered him back to Tsushima Island on the 30th. Later that day he received word that Jessen's ships had passed through the Tsugaru Strait early that morning and reached Vladivostok on the 1st of August. Battle of Ulsan on the 10th of August. The ships at Port Arthur attempted to break out to Vladivostok, but were turned back in the Battle of the Yellow Sea. Jessen was ordered to rendezvous with them, but the order was delayed. His 3 armored cruisers, Frisia, Gromoboy, and Rurik, had to raise steam, so he did not sortie until the evening of the 13th of August. By dawn he had reached Tsushima, but turned back when he failed to see any ships from the Port Arthur squadron. 36 miles north of the island he encountered Kamimura's squadron, which consisted of 4 modern armored cruisers, Awata, Izumo, Tokiwa, and Adzuma. The 2 squadrons had passed during the night without spotting one another, and each had reversed course around first light. This put the Japanese ships astride the Russian route to Vladivostok. Jessen ordered his ships to turn to the northeast when he spotted the Japanese at 5 o'clock, and they followed suit, albeit on a slightly converging course. Both sides opened fire around 5:23 at a range of 8,500 meters. The Japanese ships concentrated the fire on Rurik, the rear ship of the Russian formation. She was hit fairly quickly and began to fall astern of the other two ships. Jessen turned southeast in an attempt to open the range, but this blinded the Russian gunners with the rising sun and prevented any of the broadside guns from bearing on the Japanese. About 6 o'clock, Jessen turned 180 degrees to starboard in an attempt to reach the Korean coast and to allow Rurik to rejoin the squadron. Kamimura followed suit around 6:10, but turned to port, which opened the range between the squadrons. Adzuma then developed engine problems and the Japanese squadron slowed to conform with her best speed. Firing recommenced at 6:24 and Rurik was hit 3 times in the stern, flooding her steering compartment. She had to be steered with her engines. Her speed continued to decrease, further exposing her to Japanese fire, and her steering jammed to port around 6:40. Jessen made another 180 degrees turn in an attempt to interpose his two ships between the Japanese and Rurik, but the latter ship suddenly turned to starboard and increased speed and passed between Jessen's ships and the Japanese. Kamimura turned 180 degrees as well, so that both squadrons were heading southeast on parallel courses, but Jessen quickly made another 180 degrees turn so that they headed on opposing courses. The Russians reversed course for the third time around 7:45 in another attempt to support Rurik. Although Russia was on fire herself, her fires were extinguished about 20 minutes later. Kamimura circled Rurik to the south at 8 o'clock, then allowed the other two Russian ships to get to his north and gave them an uncontested route to Vladivostok. Despite this, Jessen turned back once more at 8:15 and ordered Rurik to make her own way back to Vladivostok before turning north at his maximum speed, about 18 knots. About this time, Kamimura's two elderly protected cruisers, Nanawa and Takachiho, were approaching from the south. Their arrival allowed Kamimura to pursue Jessen with all of his armored cruisers while the two new arrivals dealt with Rurik. They fought a running battle with the Russians for the next hour and a half, scoring enough hits on them to force the speed down to 15 knots. Adzuma's engines again broke down during this chase and she was replaced in the line by Tokiwa. The Japanese closed to a minimum of about 5,000 meters, but Kamimura then opened the range up to 6,500 meters. About 10 o'clock, Kamimura's gunnery officer erroneously informed him that Adzuma had expended 3/4 of her ammunition, and he turned back after a 5-minute rapid-fire barrage. He did not wish to leave the Tsushima Strait unguarded and thought that he could use his remaining ammunition on Rurik. By this time she had been sunk by Nanawa and Takachiho, which had closed to within 3,000 meters of Rurik in order to finish her off. They had radioed Kamimura that she was sunk, but he did not receive the message. Shortly after the Japanese turned back, Gromoboy and Russia were forced to heave to make repairs. None of the Japanese ships were seriously damaged and Adzuma only suffered 8 men wounded during the battle. On the 30th of December, Adzuma and the armored cruiser Asama were ordered to patrol Tsugaru Strait to prevent any blockade runners from reaching Vladivostok. In mid-February, Adzuma was relieved by Iwata so the former could be refitted. Battle of Tsushima. As the Russian 2nd and 3rd Pacific Squadrons approached Japan on the 27th of May, having sailed from the Baltic Sea, Jakumo was assigned to Kamimura's 2nd Division of the 2nd Fleet. The Russians were spotted by patrolling Japanese ships early that morning, but visibility was limited and radio reception poor. The preliminary reports were enough to cause Togo to order his ships to put to sea, and the 2nd Division spotted the Russian ships under the command of Vice Admiral Zeno V. Rozhestvinsky at around 11:30. Kamimura closed to about a range of 8,000 meters before sheering off under fire to join Togo's battleships. Adzuma was 2nd of 6 when Togo opened fire on the 2nd Pacific Squadron at 14:10 and, unlike most of the ships in the division, initially engaged the battleship Suvorov. At 14:50, a 12-inch shell knocked out Adzuma's aft right 8-inch gun. By 1500, the Russian formation was in disorder and Suvorov suddenly appeared out of the mist at 1535 at a range of about 2,000 meters. All of Kamimura's ships engaged her for 5 minutes or so, with Adzuma and the armored cruiser Yakumo also firing torpedoes at the Russian ship without effect. After 1730, Kamimura led his division in a fruitless pursuit of some of the Russian cruisers, leaving Togo's battleships to their own devices. He abandoned his chase around 1803 and turned northwards to rejoin Togo. His ships spotted the rear of the Russian battle line around 1830 and opened fire when the range closed to 8,000–9,000 meters. Nothing is known of any effect on the Russians, and they ceased fire by 1930 and rejoined Togo at 20:08 as night was falling. The surviving Russian ships were spotted the next morning, and the Japanese ships opened fire around 10:30, staying beyond the range at which the Russian ships could effectively reply. Rear Admiral Nikolai Nebogotov therefore decided to surrender his ships, as he could neither return fire nor close the range. Over the course of the entire battle, Adzuma was struck by 7 large shells, mostly 12-inch, 4.6 and about 4.75 mm shells. They inflicted only minor damage other than destroying 1 6-inch and 1 12-pounder gun mounts. On the 14th of June, Adzuma was assigned of the 3rd Fleet, under the command of Vice Admiral Kataroka Shichiro, for the capture of Sakhalin in July. Subsequent career, Adzuma was assigned to the training squadron on the 20th of April 1912, where she conducted long-distance oceanic navigation and officer training for cadets in the Imperial Japanese Navy Academy. For the 5th of December 1912 to the 21st of April 1913, the ship accompanied the ex-Russian protected cruiser Sawyer on a training cruise to Australia and Southeast Asia, the first of 5 overseas training cruises that she would make. Adzuma was briefly relieved of her assignment from the 1st of May to the 1st of December before beginning another training cruise to North America and Hawaii, together with Asama, on 20 April 11 August 1914. The ship was again relieved of her assignment with the training squadron on the 18th of August, and was not reassigned until the 1st of September 1915 in preparation for her next training cruise that lasted from the 20th of April to the 22nd of August 1916, and visited Australia and Southeast Asia again. The next month she was relieved of her assignment and then became the flagship of Destroyer Squadron 2 from the 1st of December 1916 to the 28th of March 1917, and then again from the 4th of August to the 24th of January 1918. In early 1917, Adzuma was dispatched on a diplomatic mission to return the body to the United States of George W. Guthrie, the ambassador to Japan, who had died while in office. The ship rejoined the training squadron on the 10th of August 1918, together with Tokiwa, and made her last 2 training cruises over the next 2 years. For the 1st of March to the 26th of July 1918, 1919. The cruisers visited Australia and Southeast Asia and then the Mediterranean from the 24th of November to the 20th of May 1920. Adzuma left the training squadron on 6 June. Final years on the 1st of September 1921, the ship was redesignated as a first-class coast defense ship. By this time her engines were in bad shape and she became a training ship for the Maizuru Naval Corps a week later. In 1924, 4 of Adzuma's 12-pounder guns were removed, as were all of her QF2.5-POUNDER guns, and a single 8 cm 43rd year type anti-aircraft gun was added. In addition, 3 of her torpedo tubes were removed. On the 1st of October 1927, she became a stationary training ship for the Maizuru Engineering School. Adzuma was refitted again in 1930. This included replacement of her boilers that reduced her horsepower to 9,400 IHP and her speed to 16 knots. For each of her 6-inch and 12-pounder guns were removed during the refit. Adzuma was stricken from the Navy list, hulked, and disarmed in 1941. On the 18th of July 1945, she was badly damaged by aircraft from the United States Navy TF-38 when they attacked Yokosuka. The ship was scrapped in 1946.